Today I'm joined by two college presidents with a stake in March Madness's soul. Eric Spina has led the University of Dayton since 2016 and is an engineer by trade. Roger Thompson has led St. Mary's College of California since 2024 and has a deep background in enrollment management. Together, they penned a pointed op-ed warning that raising the House settlement's athlete pay cap could price out mid-major programs, if it isn't already, and threatening the Cinderella stories that make college basketball's postseason unforgettable. Let's get into it. Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Karen. It's a real pleasure to join you and President Spina today. Look forward to the conversation.
Me as well. And Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Karen. Great to be here with my colleague Roger, and happy to dig in.
So, Eric, let me start with you. You know, the University of Dayton has long been the first stop in the road to the Final Four, and it carries such a special place in the history in the March Madness. What would happen if Dayton wasn't ever selected for March Madness again? What does that mean to the campus?
It would change your campus, right? I mean, basketball it's big in the Midwest, right? Indiana and southwestern Ohio. You know, basketball is what the city and the region of Dayton do in the wintertime. We renovated our arena about 5 years ago, $75 million renovation. Half the money we raised was from non-alums, right? Members of the community who believe in the importance of basketball tying the community together. So, you know, it hurts our university, our student body. It hurts our alumni connections, and actually it hurts the community in ways that would really be a terrible blow.
And Roger, St. Mary's has had some magical runs, and I can remember the storytelling that the announcers use when you all play, and, you know, how involved the fans are and just the energy around it. How would it feel like if maybe you made the first round or perhaps even advanced to the second round, but these rounds appear to be getting bigger and bigger, which means they have less value? How would that look for you guys?
Well, very similar to what Eric said. There's a lot of things to do in the Bay Area, but a Saturday night in the pavilion with St. Mary's basketball, that's the biggest game in town in Moraga and a lot of the East Bay. Our community, much I imagine like the University of Dayton and other institutions, we rally around basketball. It's the front porch to our institution. It helps us introduce prospective students and families and community members to all the things that are happening at St. Mary's the rest of the week. And so it's a really important part of our institution. It's part of our culture. It's a source of pride. And as we wrote in the op-ed, if we're not careful, schools like ours are going to have limited opportunities. And I think that would be tremendously unfortunate, not just for our communities, but for college basketball as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of why I was so taken by your op-ed, is that of all the schools that I can think about writing this piece, you two were, in my mind, the best position to write this because of your geographical distinctions, but also the history that you both had with the tournament. Talk to me a little bit, and Eric, I'll start with you about the genesis. How did you two come together to write this?
Well, I'll just go back a little bit and say, I dare say Roger probably feels the same. I mean, no one loved the House settlement, right? But it offered stability, right? The end of endless lawsuits, or hopefully the end of endless lawsuits. And the hope was, we're going to swallow hard. We'll pay the back damages, which mostly are going to not our former athletes, other former athletes.
Right.
As long as it leads to stability, which really meant cap enforcement. So, Roger and I know each other through Catholic institutions, and we kind of run in similar circles. So we would talk about this from time to time along with others. And really, as each year, the cap seemed to be skirted, or each month, skirted more and more. We could feel this is going to be way more expensive for us than we could stomach, or that our revenue would be able to keep up with, or something would have to change. So really, it was and then you began to hear some of the stories about how different universities were skirting the cap. Some of the kind of the backflips and the pretzels they would tie themselves into to appear to be under the cap, but really weren't. So that was the beginning, and probably the first draft of the op-ed really focused more on skirting the cap rather than the potential for the cap to be raised.
Yeah, there certainly was a lot of that. How accurate it was, we don't know, because those contracts are supposed to be, confidential.
I think we all know enough.
No, that's really true. We also had some issues with how quickly the College Sports Commission was turning around decisions about whether they were actually fair market value or not as well. From St. Mary's perspective, what were your coaches telling you, Roger, about all of this? I'm sure, the rumor mills are alive and well in coaching circles. What were they telling you?
Well, I think our coach is similar to what Eric shared, and Eric's humble. He took the lead on the op-ed and really did a great job bringing that all together. The House settlement, when it first occurred, I jokingly said to our coaches and athletic director, I don't think this is going to settle anything, but it's a step, I suppose. And I think our coaches, we all operated as if the cap was going to be real. And so we thought for a while there that this might actually give us some advantages. If schools were capped at 20.5, and we don't have a football program at St. Mary's, although we certainly had a great history in the early to mid 1900s, we thought, well, if schools are capped at that 20.5, the power, whatever number you want to pick, is likely going to invest heavily in football, and that might allow us in college basketball to find a lane that would be even better for us. Well, we quickly realized that was not how this was going to play out, and that the pretzeling, I kind of like that term that Eric used. It's a good visual. The pretzeling of trying to move and navigate around the cap became apparent very early. And we began to see, and what our coaches would tell me is that we would have, players that were good players on our squad, good student athletes, but they were leaving for tremendous amounts of money.
Yeah.
To go to other places, frankly, more than they would make with an NBA contract or in the G League. So I could make an argument, Karen, that we're actually economically in a very odd position. We're paying a far higher premium in college basketball than pro basketball would pay. And that economically doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we began to hear about this from our coaches pretty early. Like Eric, I think there's a number of presidents that have tried to be somewhat outspoken on this issue and say, time out. This isn't really what we all agreed to. And the part that I think is frustrating is coming out of the settlement, as my colleague shared. I mean, we're paying primarily for issues related to college football, and we don't play college football at that level. And I think that would be an easier pill to swallow if we actually followed some of the agreements that we reached on the cap. And one of the things that the op-ed, I think, probably sounds self-serving, but it sort of nicely framed, was all the study that went into determining what that number should be. And yet we quickly, as industry, as higher education, intercollegiate athletics, moved quickly out of that area. So the short answer to your question is our coaches identified it. They were the canaries in the coal mine. We could see what was coming very early.
Yeah. Eric, for my listeners, and oftentimes my doctoral students listen to these podcasts, so they may not understand what the $20.5 million cap means to a basketball-centric school. How does that work in your world?
Yeah, so we knew. I mean, let's just assume for a moment the cap was enforced.
Right.
We knew, as St. Mary's did, we were never going to get to $20.5 million. Right. What we had to figure out is, where's the middle of the Big Ten? Where's the middle of the ACC? And let's spend what they're going to spend, which we would expect to be towards the top end of our own conference, the Atlantic 10. So for us, it's, we generate a lot of revenue, right? We sell out our arena for every game now for 6 years. So, we had some confidence that we had the revenue sources to be able to spend at the level, to Roger's point, right? These schools are paying for football first, and then men's basketball, and then women's basketball, and then any boutique sports that they might want to invest in. So we had a lot of confidence that, whatever that number was going to be, call it 3, 4, 5, that's a number that we could do not in our sleep, but it would be pretty straightforward for us to do without getting that one mega donor, without using the tuition money and so on. So for us, again, the back damages had to grit your teeth. The fact that roster limits came in, which affect, frequently tuition revenue for some of our Olympic sports. We could stomach that as long as this led to stability, was predictable, the cap was there. We would be comfortable coming in at a place where we could compete for players and compete on the floor with schools from the Power Four.
Yeah. Yeah. In the Philly area, of course, we have Villanova, but we also have LaSalle, we have St. Joe's, we have Drexel. We've got schools that are, basketball focused. There's no doubt about it. So I've heard those same kinds of hopes and dreams from those presidents as well. But then they realized quickly that their $4 million pool they were going to spend on men's basketball quickly became doubled and tripled. And they were all of a sudden like, where does this money come from? So, Roger, what were you hearing about where is this money coming from?
Well, I think in our case, we have a very generous alumni and philanthropic, donors, fans, community members, many of whom really stepped up. But I think I'm going to speak, I guess I can really only speak for St. Mary's, but I think for our donors, and I do want to generalize it across the country, I think there's quickly developing a fatigue to how this is all sort of playing out.
Yeah.
I say that with all due respect to so many great Gales that contribute wonderfully to St. Mary's. But, this escalation that simply keeps happening, not even year by year. I mean, it literally is almost day by day, Karen.
Yeah.
And so I think for our donor community, we're not going to use tuition dollars. That doesn't feel right to me. We're going to try to generate the revenue in other ways. But I think if we're not careful, it begins to impact the institution in a broader way that I don't want to do at St. Mary's, and I suspect many other schools don't either. There's a number of things all of our institutions wish to get done. So I think the escalation from a donor standpoint, you're asking folks to just dig deeper and deeper each year, and that can't continue forever. And I think we are rapidly approaching the play. And also, I will say this, some of our donors philosophically don't like where this is moving, right? And I think another piece that we haven't thought about in higher education is what happens to the family that's working really hard to put their daughter or son in college at St. Mary's or University of Dayton or any of the schools like us, and they're doing everything they can to pay for that education. And then the basketball player or the football player or whatever at a different school is not only having all of their cost of attendance covered,
Yes.
but a significant amount of money past that. I think the general public is going to start to wonder about what we're doing and where we're headed in intercollegiate athletics. So it's a real challenge as we navigate this time, unless we finally bring some guidance around it, which was what we were trying to do with the settlement.
Yeah, and actually just picking up on that point,
Sure.
I mean, it is nonsensical to spend what some of these schools are spending. So recall, right, that every major league sport, right, that has a salary cap, or the revenue sharing, it's between 49 and 51%.
Yeah.
A lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of brains, but into figuring out, given scholarships and room and board and Alston payments and then revenue sharing, what the cap should be. And at 20.5 million, it was 50%. So now they're talking about 40 or 50 million.
Yes.
So we're now sharing considerably more, if you're going to be at the cap, considerably more than pro sports are paying.
Yeah.
And for some of these schools, way more than the revenue they bring in for the sport. So it makes no sense whatsoever.
No, it's a self-defeating prophecy. You're just going to drive yourself into the ground. And both of you, I know, are like so many presidents concerned about your financial viability as an institution if you have to keep redirecting funds to athletics to be competitive in there. And if you're tuition dependent more than not, you've got a situation where you're trying to attract and hold on to the students that you have. So how do you do that in this environment when every family is looking for more help and really wants to be able to manage the cost of higher education when they come to your campus? Roger, I'll start with you.
Well, that's the challenge, Karen. The pace that we're on, as Eric highlighted, I mean, it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
That's where we're going in intercollegiate athletics. It's unsustainable. And so, you probably can't put the genie back in the bottle, but we're eventually going to get far enough out on the spectrum that the snapback, if you will, is going to come. And I don't see how. But pick any large Power Four school. I think they're eventually going to hit the same issues we are.
Yeah.
Certainly from a donor fatigue standpoint, I think they'll get there. And for us, I mean, the core of what we do at St. Mary's is we create and disseminate knowledge. That's what we do at our core. And I'm not going to sacrifice that core for sort of where we're headed in intercollegiate athletics. And I want to be clear. I'm one of the, probably Eric's the same way. It would be hard to find a president more supportive of athletics
Yeah.
than me. I know that
Yeah.
sounds self-serving, but it's also true. I really want our student athletes to have great experiences and to represent our school and spread the St. Mary's name wherever. But I think, Karen, we're in such an interesting financial time anyway,
Yes.
and higher education's now kind of in this crosshairs of the strong headwinds coming from changing demographics. And
Mhm.
for the first time in my career, families really questioning the value of higher education in a way that we haven't seen before. And then we have, and I really like the way Eric said it, we're talking about revenue sharing at a place that's far surpasses what professional sports is doing.
Yeah.
And that's the part I don't understand why we don't see that in higher education. We're literally playing basketball players who probably don't have a professional career in front of them, at least not in this country, and we're paying them more than where they would begin if they had a professional career in this
Yeah.
country. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really economically upside down.
Well, and to pick up on Roger's point, yeah, we're talking about St. Mary's and Dayton and schools like us, but there's no doubt, right? Power Four schools are feeling the squeeze as well.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, the Louisville circumstance were very public when the board chair and the president and the AD, wrote that document, was it in March or April of last year? And, essentially saying that we have to stop. But then, not to pick on Louisville, but it's public. What did Louisville do at the start of the portal? They signed 2 of the top 4 players.
Exactly.
And they're I'd hate to have their rev share build this year. So it's like we can't help ourselves.
So this is why I was so interested in talking with you both, because I see you both sort of at the crux of where this argument is. How do we get what we want, which is a fantastic experience for our student athletes where they can achieve their potential both in the classroom and on the court or on the field? But also, how do we define what level of competition we want to be a part of in order to do that? Is there another way to think about this? And Eric, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think I see where you're going with that
Yeah.
question, right? And let's take this to its logical conclusion. We stay on the path that we're on. Then the big NCAA tournament is going to be the top end of Power Four schools. I mean, forget the Syracuses and the Boston colleges, and those first and second round games are going to be 14 lost teams that have already maybe played each other that year.
That's right.
So, I think the logical conclusion is the NCAA tournament, the one that people really care about, it becomes much less interesting.
Yeah.
And then schools like Dayton and St. Mary's call it Division I prime or double prime or whatever you might. And it's effectively like a Division II or Division III. And, those schools are excited, but doesn't carry the alumni base, doesn't carry the national attention that the big tournament does. I mean, that's what Dayton, and I dare say St. Mary's has always prided ourselves on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're smaller, but basketball is important here. So we want to compete at the highest level. We've been in 2 NCAA Final Fours. A few years ago, we were in the Elite 8. We believe we can play at that level, and we want to, right? We have the arena, we have the fan base, we have the talent in our athletic office, we have the basketball tradition and history. We've always been able to, and now with the construct that the Power Four has and the votes that they have,
Yes.
we're forced in a position where they're basically saying, really, we don't want you to compete with us. And one of the concerns that I have, I'll just speak for myself, is, we weren't party to the House settlement.
Right.
And we're not party to any of the negotiations that are going on to possibly raise the cap. The NCAA, though, is a party, and they are supposed to be representing us. They're supposed to be representing St. Mary's and Gonzaga's and St. Joe's and Dayton, and saying, yeah, let's try to keep the tournament as exciting as it has been, where 16 can beat a 1, where St. Mary's can beat a Purdue. So, we're going to see, whether or not the Senate passes this and Congress ultimately makes it law, whether or not they do, we're going to need the NCAA at some point to represent us because they are a party to this settlement.
That's a great
I
point.
want to pick up on that because I think that's where we have a real problem.
Yeah.
And what brings all the viewers to March Madness? I don't think it's seeing two Power Fours play each other for a fourth time.
That's right.
I don't think that's going to draw television eyeballs. I think, we're really proud at St. Mary's. In the last 20 years, only 4 schools in the country have either been in the NCAA or the NIT every year during those. And that's us, our friends to the north, Gonzaga. We're sometimes friendly with them. And Michigan State and Kansas University. That's it.
Yeah.
Not Duke, not Carolina, not Kentucky. Pick whatever basketball school you want to pick. Those are the 4. And I really believe the NCAA, the March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament is truly the golden goose. It just lays golden eggs over and over and over. But part of that's because Loyola Chicago makes the Final Four.
Yeah.
And even Villanova back in the day when they started their runs. So St. Joe, we could go through a whole list of schools. The NCAA has a responsibility, in my view, to lead. It's time to step up and bring some sanity into this process. And everything's being driven by college football, which I love college football as much as the next guy. Spent most of my career working at places where college football was really important. But if that's what's going to drive things, it's really difficult for schools that don't have that program to not be part of the settlement, simply be handed the bill, and then watch the part that we care about deeply at our institutions, the NCAA tournament, somehow become jeopardized. I mean, we're expanding the tournament. Is that really going to open more opportunities for schools like us?
Yeah.
Or is that, let a 500 or below winning percentage in a Power 4 conference get into those first couple rounds? I suspect it's that. I don't want to speak for Eric, but Dayton's kind of become the place that, they are the place that hosts those opening rounds.
Yeah.
What's the impact is it going to be like there? I mean, there's just so much to this and frankly, there's more schools like us than there are Power 4 schools.
Yeah.
Or Power whatever number you want to pick.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just really concerned that we're going to lose something that has been incredibly special, not just in higher education, in our country. How many people across the country sit down and fill out a bracket? Are you really going to be excited to do that for the Power number 4 teams that are playing for the 4th time that year? I don't think so. It's something very special, and it should be treated as such. And that's the part I don't see us doing. And that's very frustrating because the NCAA is a member organization. And there's, again, more members like us than there are of the other group. And we just need to bring some reasonableness to this process. No one was opposed to student athletes, or maybe very few were opposed to student athletes participating in the revenue sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone in higher education, by and large, was opposed to that. But how we've structured the system today, it's just simply not sustainable, and it eliminates a competitive playing field.
Eric, I don't know how many people really understand how much voting power you all lost in the last year at the NCAA. Perhaps you can help our listeners understand. It used to be way back in the day, one school, one vote. It's no longer that. Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, well, so I forget how many years ago. Roger would know better than me, but there was a time where essentially, the Power 5 at the time were effectively threatening to leave if they didn't have more influence. And at that time, they went to weighted voting in the board. And the board is dominated by Power 5, Power 4 schools, with the other 28 conferences rotating in and out. So you're on a seat for 3 or 4 years, and then you're out. So there was already a disadvantage. But to your point, just in the last year, the weighting voted got even stronger. That really now certainly the Power Four agrees on anything. They can make it happen independent of what the other 280 schools might want.
Yeah. When I saw that last year, I was just absolutely feeling like they said, thanks, we're great to have your numbers, but you really don't matter that much. And if the four of us decide, four of the Power Four are going to decide how this is going to go, then we're going to decide how this is going to go. And no matter what you do, unless you can convince one of the four of us to go with you, then we're going to do this.
Well, the Atlantic 10 really over the last 8 years until a year ago when we finally lost for the last time had really been pushing for some important level of governance to be have representatives from every single conference.
Yeah.
Right? And so some of those opportunities, some of our fellow conferences like us, unfortunately voted against their best interests in my mind. So we, for whatever combination of reasons, we gave them the opportunity to do this, and they really have leveraged that over the last few years.
Just to build on that point, when we talked about this at the West Coast Conference, and we're similar to the A10, very strong basketball conference, it was amazing to me how quickly our representation vanished. And it was almost seemed overnight. And the part that I think a number of us in our league, and I'm sure in other leagues, raised, I made the joke at one of our president's council's meetings that, I sort of remember a big dust up in this country about taxation without representation. It happened a couple hundred years ago. In fact, we just celebrated that not long ago.
There was a tea party somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. And in Boston, they dumped a lot of tea over that issue. And so here we sit as, one of the schools like us. It's not just sort of taxation without representation. Our voting rights have been shrunken.
Yeah.
And I said to our colleagues, I said, I'd just like a thank you note for paying for all of the football expenses that we're doing as part of this. That alone would just be nice. Hey, St. Mary's, thanks for contributing to help pay the bills here in the power, the BCS group. It's very frustrating, Karen.
Yeah.
And I understand everybody. I'm paid to look out for the interests of St. Mary's. I understand that. And all my colleagues at those other schools are in the same position. But at some point, you have to acknowledge that if we're not all in the boat together and thinking about the broader implications of what we do, we truly, as the op-ed headline said, Cinderella's going to die a painful death. And I don't think that's a movie Disney wants to produce. So, we need to be really cautious about how we go forward, because the path we're on, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for where we end up, I think, for the general public in higher education.
Yeah, just to Roger's point, it takes some thoughtfulness by the folks who do have the votes, who do have the power, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, not every conference is like Roger's conference or like the Atlantic 10, where our focus is on getting more than the automatic qualifier bid, right? And I think that's one of our challenges. So many of these conferences, they know they will have no representation other than the automatic qualifier in the tournament, right? So the number of conferences and the number of schools within those conferences that really are focused on, let's be strong enough to get 2 bids or 3 bids, or wouldn't it be wonderful to get four bids? So I don't think it would take an awful lot for the powers that are controlling this to say, let's be thoughtful to make certain that there are these opportunities that beyond the AQs, let's get some of these basketball schools in who really do have fan bases, who are willing to travel and play on the road and play at neutral sites. So really, just again, I don't think it would take a lot to really be thoughtful about how to continue the strength of what college basketball is, right? Coast to coast, large to small, right? I mean, St. Mary's. How many students right now at St. Mary's, Roger? 20. Yeah. So it can beat a school with 100,000, and that's exciting.
Yeah,
I'll give you an example, Karen. When we beat last year in the NCAA tournament, we beat Vanderbilt in the first round. And I said, if you look
about that, yeah,
doggone it, if we could have shot the basketball in round 2, we might have beat Alabama. But I'll leave that aside. But But anyway, when that game ended, my joke to our athletic director was, I said, this is such a wonderful moment, having worked at a lot of big schools in my career. We just took down an SEC school with an athletic budget that's probably smaller than what their, engineering school is or something. Right. I mean, it was really gratifying. And you look at the ratings from those kinds of games, they're through the roof. That's what people want to see.
The first two rounds are always the best. That's what I tune in for. That type of thing. Okay, I'm going to ask you, it might be a bit of a explosive question, but do you worry that the media companies are picking and choosing who they want in these tournaments because of the media values they bring to the games they play?
Roger, you want to?
I was going to let you start with that one, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. The media companies they have to make a profit, right? And I think that's what they're motivated by. And let's face it, as many people who are wearing Dayton Flyer hats out, there's a lot more who want to wear Alabama hats. So I think they're following their own best interest. And again, that's where, a governance body that truly represents all the members and says, we're stronger together, large and small, north and south, east and west, small conference, big conference. That's where leadership has to say, well, let's find a way for everybody to be there. And someone with huge multimedia rights and ability to sell a patch for $36 million, that university has earned that money and they should get to keep it. But let's work on how to maintain the level playing field. So they are, no doubt, multimedia rights companies are participating in a way in the cap that they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're doing anything to block us beyond following their own self-interest. I don't know, Roger, do you see it differently?
Yeah. No, I think that's very well said. And I think we're all Americans. We believe in capital, or I would assume most of us believe in capitalism, and that's all we're seeing playing out here. At least I do, and so that's what we're seeing playing out. But the thing that's sad through all of this, and our fan base is going to have a hard time this year. Gonzaga is not in our league anymore.
Yeah,
and for us, I mean, I can't tell you what it's like at a Gonzaga game at St. Mary's. I mean, I've seen lots of football tailgates. I'll put what happens here up against any of those schools any day. They're out there morning through night, ready to go. And anyway, someone from ESPN, I'm not going to say who, because I don't think it was said for me to share on a podcast, but the individual said to me, this is a game that I hate to see go away.
Yeah.
This has been an incredible game. And I said, I hope we can still play it, at least once a year or rotate or something. And the ratings on that are always competitive with anybody. And so people want to see it. And we just, I don't know. Eric said it much better than me. So maybe I'll just stop there. I think they have an appropriate amount of influence from the media companies, and they're all out to do their own thing. But it's where you should have leadership at the NCAA level that says, there's some great matchups that could happen at our level, right? We're playing St. Louis University this year at St. Mary's. We have a home and home with them. St. Louis is a fantastic basketball program, as the folks in the A10 know, and we're pretty good in the West Coast Conference. That's going to be a terrific game, and it'll get wonderful media coverage. So they have an appropriate amount of influence. I think the responsibility to make things better is at the NCAA level with all of the members.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I really want to thank you for your time and your honesty and your caring for not only what's best for your school, but what's best for the sport. I think that's something that really resonated with me throughout our conversation. And for my listeners, I will link the op-ed in the show notes so that you can read it as well. But thank you so much for making the time today for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was fun. It was fun, Karen. I appreciate you and really appreciate my colleague, Roger. So,
yeah, thank you, Karen. It was a fun time, and hopefully we'll get this recentered a little bit.
Yeah, Roger and I are we're going to go on the road, appearing next in Philadelphia.
I have the perfect face for radio, so I'm ready to do that whenever. But, one last thought. Think about the Olympics coming to our country in 2028. The Olympics are in Los Angeles. And the path we're on, we will damage Olympic sports. You can see it coming.
Yeah.
And that should be another concern at the NCAA level and across higher education. Who's going to provide the swimmers, the tennis player, all the things that we see in the Olympics? So anyway, this was a great conversation. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Eric, for